History of Dart. The Dart programming language was unveiled by Google in October 2011. It was designed to enable the construction of complex, high-performance apps for the web, servers, and mobile devices, aiming to solve shortcomings of JavaScript for large-scale projects. Dart is often associated with the Flutter framework, which utilizes the Dart language for creating natively compiled applications across multiple platforms. While code is not applicable for discussing the history of Dart, it's important to note that Dart aimed to offer improved structure, performance, and security features for web development. It's now used extensively for mobile and web app development, especially with Flutter, Google's UI toolkit for building natively compiled applications for mobile, web, and desktop from a single codebase. Dart VM. The Dart VM stands for Dart Virtual Machine. It is a program that executes Dart code directly without first compiling it to machine code, allowing for just-in-time JT compilation during development. The Dart VM also includes ahead-of-time AOT compilation for deploying Dart code to production environments. This simple Hello Dart VM program demonstrates how a basic Dart file looks. When you run this file in a Dart development environment with the Dart VM, it executes the main function without needing to compile it to machine code first. The Dart VM will compile the code just in time, allowing for fast iteration during development. It's particularly useful when you want to run your Dart code on the command line or within a Flutter application during its development stage. DartPad, Online Dart Editor. DartPad is an online editor that allows you to write, run, and share Dart code directly in the browser. The provided code is a basic Dart program written in DartPad. The main function is the entry point of Dart applications. The print function outputs the string "Hello DartPad" to the console. When you run this code in DartPad, you'll see the output displayed in its console window. Installing Dart SDK. To work with Dart and run Dart applications, you must first install the Dart SDK software development kit. It includes the libraries and command line tools needed for developing Dart applications. There isn't a code snippet associated with the installation process of Dart SDK. The installation generally involves downloading the SDK from the official Dart website and running the installer on your operating system. On macOS and Linux, this can also be done via a package manager like Homebrew or apt. After installation, you can verify the installation by running dart-version in your command line or terminal, which should output the installed Dart version. Dart Editor Setup. Setting up a Dart editor is the first step to start coding with Dart. Although you can use any text editor, an IDE designed for Dart can provide additional features such as syntax highlighting, code completion, and debugging tools. To start programming in Dart, you'll want to set up Dart SDK and an IDE that supports Dart. Popular options include DartPad, an online tool, Visual Studio Code with the Dart extension, or Android Studio with the Dart and Flutter plugins. The installation process generally involves downloading the Dart SDK and configuring the IDE to use it. After setup, you'll be able to create Dart projects, write code, and run Dart applications directly from the editor. Hello World program. The Hello World program is a traditional first step in learning a new programming language. It's a simple exercise where you write a program that outputs the phrase "Hello World" to the console. This will introduce you to the basic structure and syntax of Dart. The main function is the entry point of the Dart program, where the execution starts. The print function is used to output text to the console. In this case, "Hello World" is passed as an argument to print, which displays the string to the console when the program is run. Syntax. Dart, like any programming language, has its own syntax, the set of rules for writing valid code. Syntax covers aspects like how to declare variables, define functions, and control flow statements. By understanding syntax, you can write code that the Dart compiler understands and executes. In the provided code sample, void main declares the entry point of the Dart application. var greeting equals hello Dart declares a variable named greeting and assigns it a string value. The print function is then called to output the value of greeting to the console. The syntax of declaring variables, assigning values, and calling functions are all fundamental concepts in Dart. Variables and data types. In Dart, variables are storage locations in memory with a name. Data types define the type of data a variable can hold. Dart is an optionally typed language, which means you can either specify the data type explicitly or use the var keyword to let the compiler infer the type. In this code, an integer is declared with an explicit data type int, representing integer values. A double is a double type for floating point numbers. A string is a string for text, and a Boolean is a bool for Boolean values. Lastly, the var keyword is used for a number, and Dart infers its type as int since 42 is an integer. Strings and string interpolation. In Dart, a string is a sequence of characters. Strings can be created using single or double quotes. String interpolation allows you to include expression values within a string using the syntax expression. In the provided code, name is assigned the string Alice, and age is an integer with a value of 25. The greeting string demonstrates string interpolation, where the value of name and age are inserted directly into the string. The backslashes are used to escape the dollar signs in this context for display purposes. In actual Dart code, they would be omitted and only dollar signs would be used. Numbers, int and double. In Dart, numbers come primarily in two forms: int for integers, which are whole numbers, and double for floating point numbers, which can contain fractional parts. The int type is for numbers without a decimal point, while double can handle decimals and exponential notation. This code creates an integer variable age with a value of 30 and a double variable pi with a value of 3.14. It also demonstrates how to define integers using hexadecimal values, as shown with hex value. The print statements output the values to the console. Boolean. In Dart, a Boolean is a data type that can hold one of two possible values, true or false. Boolean expressions are a fundamental part of control flow statements, such as if, for, and while, as they determine the path of execution based on certain conditions being met. In the provided code, we define a function isEven that takes an integer as its parameter and returns a Boolean value indicating whether the number is even. It does this by checking if the remainder of the number divided by 2 equals 0, which is a common way to determine evenness. Then, in the main function, we call isEven with the argument 10. It returns true because 10 is indeed an even number. The result is stored in a Boolean variable result and then printed to the console. Dynamic and var keyword. In Dart, the dynamic and var keywords are used to declare variables that can hold any type of value. The difference between the two is that var infers a static type based on the initial value assigned to the variable, whereas dynamic explicitly tells Dart that the variable's type is unknown and should be checked at runtime, offering more flexibility but less type safety. Here, A is statically typed as string because it's initialized with a string value. Attempting to assign an integer to A later on would result in a compile time error. However, variable B is declared with the dynamic keyword, which means it can hold a value of any type without causing a compile time error. In the commented outline, assigning a string to B would work just fine at runtime. Because A is statically typed due to var, the code shows how var helps catch errors at compile time that dynamic would not. Constants, final and const. In Dart, constants are used to define values that are not intended to change over time. Dart provides two keywords to define constants, final and const. The final keyword is used when you want to set a value only once, and it can be set at runtime. The const keyword is used when you want to declare a compile time constant that must be assigned a value at the time of declaration and cannot be changed thereafter. In the code example, my final number is declared as final. Its value is set to the current year retrieved from datetime.now, year, which is evaluated at runtime. This means that its value can only be determined when the program is executed. On the other hand, my const number is declared with the const keyword meaning its value is determined at compile time and must be a constant value, in this case, the number 10. Attempting to change either of these values will result in a compilation error, as they are fixed for the duration of the program. If and else. In Dart, if and else are control flow statements that allow you to perform different actions based on whether a condition is true or false. The if statement can be used alone, or with one or more else or else-if blocks to provide additional conditions and actions. The provided code declares a main method, which is the entry point of a Dart application. The variable number is set to 10. The if statement initially checks if number is greater than 0. If this is true, the number is positive, is printed to the console. If not, the control flows to the else-if statement, checking if number is less than 0. If this condition is true, the number is negative is printed. Otherwise, the else block is executed, and the number is 0 is printed since no other conditions matched. Switch and case. In Dart, the switch statement is used for selecting one of many code blocks to be executed. The case keyword specifies a block of code to run if the switch expression matches its value. Each case in a switch block must be unique and end with a break statement. Optionally, a default case can be used to execute code when none of the cases match. In this code example, we define a variable command with the value open. The switch statement then evaluates the command. Since it matches the second case, open, it executes the corresponding block of code and prints, the door is open. The break keyword prevents the execution from falling through to subsequent cases or the default. If command was something other than closed or open, the default case would execute and print unknown command. For loops. In Dart, a for loop is used to repeat a block of code a set number of times. The for loop consists of 3 parts: the initializer, the condition, and the afterthought. The loop executes as long as the condition evaluates to true. After each iteration, the afterthought is executed. In this code, the for loop initializes a variable I to 0. The condition I10 is checked before the execution of the loop's body. If true, the print I statement is executed. After each pass through the loop, I is incremented by 1 due to the I++ afterthought. The loop will run 10 times, printing the numbers 0 through 9. While and do-while loops. A while loop is used to execute a block of code repeatedly as long as the given condition is true. It checks the condition before executing the loop's body. In the provided code, number is initialized to 0. The while loop checks if number is less than 5. Since the condition is true, it enters the loop, prints the value of number, and then increments it by 1. This process continues until number reaches 5, at which point the condition becomes false and the loop exits. Break and continue. The break statement in Dart is used to terminate the loop early. It can be used in both for and while loops. When the break statement is executed, the loop stops and the program continues with the next statement immediately following the loop. In this code snippet, the for loop is designed to print numbers from 0 to 9. However, there is an if statement that checks if the loop variable I equals 5. When I is 5, the break statement executes and terminates the loop, so the numbers printed will only be 0 to 4. Assert. The assert statement in Dart is used during development to disrupt normal execution if a Boolean condition is false. It is generally used for debugging purposes to ensure that a certain condition holds true. When running in production mode, assert statements are ignored and no performance penalty is imposed. In the provided code, the first assert statement checks that the variable text is not null. The second assert statement checks that the variable number is less than 100, and it includes an optional message that will be printed if the assertion fails. When you run the code in development mode, for example, when using the Dart VM with the command line, enable -asserts flag, the second assert statement will cause the program to throw an exception, since number is not less than 100. The message, the number must be less than 100, would also be printed to the console to help the developer understand the reason for the failure.